Hello. There are a couple of instances that I can recall from my past where I wasn't in control of the situation, and if things had gone slightly differently, it could have been completely disastrous. I might not physically be here anymore, and the world as I knew it would have been completely shattered. And I think we can all think back on moments like this where it felt like our fates were so precarious, and it's difficult not to mull over and wonder, what would I have done if I lived through that situation? How would I have carried on with any kind of life? And I've been thinking about this because I just read a very powerful debut Irish novel called Show Me Where It Hurts by Gleeson. And this story follows such a disastrous occurrence, which is shown in the very beginning of the book, in the very first 2 pages, and it's titled Something Wild and Terrible, and it follows the protagonist Rachel as she is a passenger in her car, and her husband Tom is driving, and their 2 children are in the back seat, and they're returning from a visit to her in-laws. And her husband, Tom, turns to her and says, "I'm sorry." And then he turns the steering wheel, drives them off the road with the intention of killing both himself and his entire family. And the story carries on from there, and we follow Rachel's journey, and both in the time before and after this horrific occurrence, and the chapters alternate between the time before and after, and so we try to piece together how and why this occurred, but then the story, as it progresses, probes a deeper meaning and questions surrounding this. And firstly, I think this is so cleverly structured because in alternating between the time before and after, it's kind of mimicking Rachel's present experience, the eternal present for her after such a disaster, which has become such a obviously significant thing in her own life since she survives through it, that it's almost impossible to move beyond it. So as a reader, as I was reading the sections before leading up to it occurring, I felt like I was sort of sliding down into this horrific well, that there is an inevitability to this occurrence, because we know it happens in the very beginning, but also in following the time after, as she is progressing and carrying on with her life, but with the knowledge that this happened, that the worst kind of betrayal imaginable occurred. And so also, as in following the time before, we see how Tom suffered from severe mental health issues and severe depression, and this led to this sense in his mind that really it would be better if he and his family were just removed. And working through this kind of horrible instance, but still holding on to a sense of the love she felt for her husband before he was racked with this kind of depression, and trying to preserve that memory, because there is public speculation and interest and media interest in this, because it is such a dramatic thing which occurs, and people try to characterize her husband as a monster, but she didn't know him as such. She knew him as a loving man and father, and so this process of writing about the before is trying to reclaim that sense of love she felt for her husband, not excuse at all what he did and what occurred, but for her own sense of sanity and sense of well-being, to preserve this sense that it wasn't her that could have prevented this, that that this was a man who, in all outward ways, was loving and caring, and then in the time after, following, how do you rebuild your life after something like this occurs? How do you move on and carry on? Do you even want to? And one of the most heart-wrenching things about this is after this occurs, her mother and other people in her life are trying to console her, are trying to help her work through this, and naturally she has a lot of dark thoughts and feelings after this, and lashes out at them. And I always find it such a twist to the gut when reading about characters who are well-meaning, who are trying to do the right thing, and getting rebuked in this way. I just find that so tragically sad. But obviously, she has survived through the worst thing imaginable, and it's entirely understandable that she is incredibly upset, is suffering from so many conflicting emotions, and trying to figure out how to carry on. And so I think this story is so powerful in its structure, in its style of writing, in conveying her emotional state, both in the times before and after, and following through to a point when she can rebuild a new life while still having this thing occurred, and knowing that it happened, and not being able to forget it. And I think it's something that we can apply to our own lives, even though it's a very dramatic thing that occurs in this story, that we all have instances in our past which we can relate to, whether the worst thing happened or not, to that we might have people very close to us in our lives, family members or partners or friends, who acted really badly, and there might have been all sorts of reasons for this, but to still try to move on with and not feel like that our love and our feelings for those people close to us are invalid, because they are still valid, even when people that we know and love and care about act really badly. And I think that is how this novel grapples with something so difficult, and works through it, and follows the trajectory of her journey through it in such a meaningful way. And also, I really appreciated how this novel evoked a sense of environment, of different parks in Dublin, because I was fortunate enough to travel to Dublin recently, and I didn't know this novel was mostly set in Dublin, and so to see those physical spaces in the city, and to see mention of the legendary Irish bookstore Hodges Figgis, which I visited while I was there, and picked up another recent Irish book while I was there. It was such a pleasure to see that physical place represented in this novel, while I was physically there and able to visit these different spots. So yeah, I appreciated this novel on many different levels, and found it very impactful. And if you've read this book, I would love to know what you think of it, or if you're interested in reading it now, or if you've read any short stories by Claire Gleeson, because she's a short story writer as well, but this is her very first novel. I would love to hear about that in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.